I read the book probably when I was in my late teens, and I loved it and probably thought it was a very romantic book, kind of not really thinking it through properly. Then I remember the film. I remember seeing the film a long time ago. And then I remember there was one or two productions from the BBC with Joanna David, I think, playing the second Mrs. De Winter. So yes, and then obviously coming back to it now, it's a completely different kind of story, particularly in this day and age, and totally makes you rethink what you initially thought of it. And interesting again watching the film, the Hitchcock film, and seeing quite how kind of manipulative and taking a different look at it. So that was very interesting. My process is that I look at a lot of references, and particularly to capture the mood. I mean, we know a lot about this period. I hate to say it, that Katie and I have done it so many times, with Atonement and recently with Darkest Hour. And you kind of think, oh, do I really? But it's actually not about the period. It's all about the story. It's all about storytelling. And it was trying to the fact that you had two things in this story. You had the house, Mandalay, which is such an evocative, that first line, last night I dreamt I went again to Mandalay. And then you've also got this character, Rebecca, who is she? You don't know who she is, you don't know anything about her, but she's this massive character. And, in a way, we kind of almost had to put a line in the budget for Rebecca. Obviously, we did our room and things, but, she's a character that has an influence and a touch throughout the whole film. So that was an interesting, there are these interesting strands that go all the way through. One of the first things that we talked about was, the fact that this house is this massive character. And it's interesting because the house is described as very historic, even though they're not aristocratic. It's quite a grand house, and the fact that, she says, I'm going to make it one of the greatest houses in Britain. Now, that's an interesting statement. Is it like renowned for its parties, which I think is what she was referring to? That's Rebecca. Or, it's not a grand house as in, like top aristocracy, but it is a landed house. It has been there for centuries because it's described as all the the Tudor paintings and Elizabethan paintings and things like that. So, and the other thing I thought was very interesting about the house is the fact that, this is something Ben did say, was this idea that and I think it's something that maybe he empathized, is that, when he goes around big houses, to him they're like double Dutch. They're like, what is this? Whereas to me, it's a busman's holiday. You go around, he's kind of like knowing every house in England. But, for him, it was like, and that's how the second Mrs. De Winter would have felt. When she walks into this house, she has no idea about the etiquette, about the process, the fact that you have your, morning room, dining room, library. You go to all these different places for all these different purposes. And it's just an absolute bafflement to her. I think it's very much in the performances, and therefore, Julian can bring it out in the costumes. I think it's very much, the slyness of, the servants and all of that. And I think the ball, we really wanted to push it with the ball and make it, quite have a quite surreal air, which I certainly think, we did with the background to the ball and the costume and the makeup, so that it had that feel of. It goes into a nightmare sequence, and so there's all these kind of faces and things. And then of course Rebecca's world, that you step into something completely different, but it is still part of the world. But it's like, how can that exist alongside that house? How can that exist? Within that world. And I think that's all very interesting. And I mean, for me, it's an interesting thing that is tonally. It goes from the south of France that is light and bright, and this whole world of the demi-monde down there, and then as you go through the story, you end up down on the quay, down on the beach, and by choosing that location as opposed to maybe something much more obvious and more beautiful, which we certainly looked at all of those down in Cornwall. But what's great about Hartland Quay is that it is black. You know, it's dark, and the whole geological, you know, you've got something that's like billions of years old, this geological cliffs that just were crushed together, you know, and they're in turmoil and they're in strife. And, you know, that represents everything that's just gone wrong in this house. You know, it's just a complete mashup, and is dark and ugly and sharp, and, you know, and that epitomized the, you know, what has happened to them as a family and to his relationship, you know, and so for me that, you know, persuading Ben to go with that location was great. It was a great end to the story. There was no softness there.